Hi, welcome back to the We're Not From Hollywood podcast. I'm Brandon Reines,
Hey, I'm Faizel Gentleman.
and our guest today is a filmmaker he's not quite from Edmonton, he's from Edson, Alberta, which is very close, but he does a lot of his work in Edmonton. Welcome, Spencer Richard.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we were last episode we did with Julie Whalen. We probably spent about half the show talking about Spencer and his new movie. So
What?
maybe we should just have him on the show himself instead of talking about him behind his back.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm happy to be here. I listened to your guys' first episode so far. It was really enjoyable. I was cleaning my garage while I was doing it. I absorbed some stuff and I'm excited to talk to you about it. And listen to Julie's episode too. That's awesome.
We will get this one up before your Edson premiere of your movie Dance with the Devil. So maybe before we get into talking about your movie, just tell us, because you're kind of a musician, number one. So maybe tell us about how you got into that.
Sure. I'll give a Cliff Notes backstory of sorts. I was actually born in Edmonton, but I wound up growing up primarily in Hinton, Alberta, which is a few hours west. And small town, kind of environment, and I really enjoyed it. But I took to music very early. My earliest memory was playing piano as a toddler. I was just like smashing the keys, and I remember thinking it was the most beautiful thing ever, and it likely wasn't. But I became enamored with the instrument, but I could not read music very easily. I eventually was put into music lessons, and I despised them at first because I didn't want to learn how to read other people's music, and it was kind of an uphill battle. But on the same token, I was quite prolific and prodigious, actually. I was playing at a very advanced level compared to what I could read, which was diddly squat. So they could tell I had talent, and my parents very generously or brilliantly, I guess, they talked to my piano teacher and said, "Dear God, please, could you just let him do his thing, but encourage him to grow in ways that support his own desire to do his own thing." And so she started to teach me things that were relevant to composition. And I felt like that was really helpful. And I would compose at recitals, and it was all just piano music. I had poetry, and I would write poetry sometimes, but I never thought I would be singing or rapping or anything like that. Didn't have that kind of courage. But when I was 17, I had some opportunities with piano. I performed in some bigger capacities, and I started to pick up the guitar, and I taught myself guitar more or less overnight, because it translates pretty well, I guess, when you know one instrument. And I started writing songs right away with my, with my voice, which hadn't developed at the time, and I didn't know how to sing or who to sing in front of. And it was quite contemporary at first, very singer-songwriter stuff. And I gradually got more and more confident and started writing quicker rhymes. I started to play with the piano and compose and write songs too, and, in front of friends. But it wasn't until I never thought I could take it seriously, music, because I don't know, maybe it is a bit of that small town. We were told, go get a trade, go do something practical, right? Get a job that pays the bills, and then if you're lucky enough, you'll make a bit of time to pursue your passion on the side. And that was, I don't know, that was like telling a fax machine how to email. I just couldn't seem to do that. So instead, I hit a breaking point, and I was 25. My first daughter wasn't quite 1 year old. And I just sort of looked at myself and thought, why don't I try taking the music thing a little bit more seriously and come out as a rap artist? Like, I really love rap. And I thought, I can compose and I can play music. If there's people my age and younger who know how to produce, who know how to hook a piano up to the computer and figure out all that shit, it's like, why can't I do that? So I dug into YouTube. I started learning. I got Ableton Live as a trial version, started producing right away, made a couple of songs. And I think that started about a 3-year journey to get to my first album, which was not produced or mixed or mastered as well as I can do now, because it's a continuing journey. And I just got more serious about music. That led to film, because I wanted to make music videos, and I started partnering with a couple of buddies who knew how to do a little bit about that. And I mentored from them. I learned from them, because I really took to the craft, and I loved film as well. I've always loved cinema, and I love the expression of music and film together. I think it can create magic. So from that, yeah, I started to direct more things. And then it's like, I don't know, next thing you know, I had like 30 music videos or something. I was making a living doing promotion for other people with film stuff. I had started to invest in myself, and the two worlds of music and film collided in a very fortuitous way. And I'm very grateful for it, but it hasn't been easy either. How's that for a Cliff Notes version?
I love it.
I mean, I'm very curious. I have some questions if you don't mind. I'd love to dive in.
Please.
I don't play an instrument myself. It's a regret that one day I'm going to remedy. But I'm like, music is a huge part of my life. And I'm very curious to talk to another filmmaker who, would you consider yourself a filmmaker first or a musician first, I guess?
At this, I guess if you get to the root of it, I'd probably just call myself an artist.
An artist?
But I am a filmmaker and I am a musician. You know, in a funny way, actually, I'm more apt to call myself a rap artist or producer than a musician, even though there are certain people in my life who'd smack me upside the head for saying that, because I do have some musical ability. I play the piano and I am a musician. I get it. But I've had musicians in studio where like they make love to their guitar. Like they have a relationship. They play that thing every day. And it's more than just a tool to get art out. It is a relationship. It's something deeper. And so
It's an extension.
True. Yeah. And I feel like, though in some ways this is also true for me, I think of myself as a rap artist because I think, a musician, songwriter, rap artist, it can encapsulates all that.
Well, I guess I'll refine my question down a little bit. What I was wondering is what informs like your storytelling perspective? Because in my experience, and like I may be completely off about this because like sometimes I just think things and then I'm like, maybe this is right. But like when I look at my own storytelling abilities and when I try to sit down and write a script, the way I come at it, I feel like is always more of a songwriter than a script writer because rather than like defining my characters, defining my world, I tend to like pick motifs from other spots and then like work them in and kind of blend them in together and create something new using several different motifs that like aren't wholly original. But I've met other writers who they start with the character, they flesh it out, they build their world, and then they start writing the story. Whereas like I said, I usually jump in story first. And like I said, I identify that a little bit with singer-songwriter stuff just because like it's like there's this melody that I really like and I'm going to pull it here and then I like this like set of lyrics. I'm going to throw this on top of here and like work on that a little bit. Do you think that defines your storytelling a little bit or how do you go about it?
I can relate to that. I think that it's a very mysterious and eclectic process, right?
Extremely.
I know as for myself, I see similarity or transferable skill, I guess, between music and film or songwriting and film, songwriting and story. Because music has a kind of narrative. It can have it can have literal narrative where you're actually telling a story through lyrics, and I've done that kind of thing sometimes. But it has a growth. You know, it has like an inciting hook. It has something that brings you in, and it often rises to a certain climax. And what's happening as a musical artist, I think, is often you are influencing emotion or you're playing with that level of things, and that's what film is doing too. And so I think there's something similar about the fields, music and film and story and music and story and film. They have an ability to kind of dovetail together. There is that natural arc there. It's like structure plays a role, but there are times when you must diverge from structure or play with structure. Do things like know the rules so that you can break them. And I think that's true for both mediums as well. I could try to answer your question just a little better, just to say that my process precisely often is as a discovery writer. I've got a few short stories published as well. And like, I love to tell stories and like I'm writing my own films and all that. But I often don't know what I'm doing until I get to the end. And then I go, oh, this is what it's about. And then I will rewrite and kind of hone and fix. And this is true as well for music sometimes. I'll write a verse and then I'll get to the hook or something. And then the hook will, like the emotion of the music or whatever, it'll speak to me in this other way that will make me want to modify or, you know, make a whole narrative, make the whole story different of the song. So I will rewrite and I will mess around and stuff. And often I discover what I'm trying to say by speaking, by trying to say it, by, instead of just thinking about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I find like a lot of the time when like I don't like I play bass, but I wouldn't really consider myself a musician, so I've never really written songs. But it is a similar process, I bet, to writing movies. But I kind of like what Spencer was saying that I find like if you go, it's like if you pre-plan too much, if you kind of go in with too much, it ruins it. Somehow it doesn't leave enough room for the creativity. So I like to go in and like I've even said with the first draft of Grotesque, it was way more horror. It was a bit like scarier, a
Mm.
bit more serious. Mildred had a few wisecracks, but it kind of developed a bit more as it went. So when I did subsequent drafts, it's like, oh, Mildred's kind of a funny wisecracker. I'll develop that a bit more. And then it turned into what it did. Whereas if I had have gone in where this is exactly what we're doing, like her entire character's planned out, I don't think it would have been as good. You kind of got to just jump into it and kind of let the character of the song develop as you're going through and then kind of flesh out certain things. But I like it. It's almost like writing is like a form of discovery. It's kind of like I have a rough idea, I have an outline of where the story is going, but all of a sudden, certain characters or something start to kind of be not what I planned, and then it's like I should go with that. Like that's actually better than what I intended to do. And then when I do other drafts, I'll kind of push that angle a little bit better. I find it's a much more fulfilling way to do it rather than the screenwriting school way where you develop all your characters, you write out their backstories, you figure out the exact structure, and then execute it. It's kind
Yeah.
of like it doesn't leave enough room to. I kind of like to. This is where the story is going, but I'll add in a bunch of funny parts or other things or other ideas for scary parts. And then if you got to leave yourself open to that. That's why like I don't like pre-planning too much. I don't even like thinking like Faizel was saying. A lot of writers come up with the characters first. I
Mhm.
find that is I don't say boring way to do it, but I like to just start writing it and kind of let the character develop through the stuff that's happening in the story, through the action, and
Hmm.
then just kind of build on that later. And of course,
Oh,
once you cast an actor doing it, the actor brings so much to it because also now it's a real person.
Right.
So that kind of thing where if you go in and it's like, this is the
Hmm.
exact character, you have to model yourself to this. I kind of just like to leave it a bit more open because honestly, like as soon as Elizabeth Chamberlain was cast as Mildred, Mildred all of a sudden exploded and became this real thing that it would not have been just words on the page.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying with that, and I agree. It's in people do come at it in different ways. I think I think I thought of a metaphor as you were talking, like a current. There's a current, and there are currents, ocean currents that are actually undetectable from the surface. And I think about the process of art a little bit like we can become scientific about it. You can stand outside the current, and this is the story. You can kind of see where it's going. You can kind of get the sense of it. You can study it, you can examine it. And if we are people who play with currents very frequently, we get a kind of expertise and insight on that. But when you get in the zone or once you get writing, I think what you're describing to me is a little bit like actually getting in the current and the experience. It may take you places you didn't expect. And I think that, yeah, as an artist, you're trying to kind of reconcile the two. You don't want the experience for the viewer to be necessarily the same thing as just being caught up in a current that's hectic. Like you want to create some order, but you need to study and also bring that life and character to it. And I love what you said about like bringing Elizabeth on, and then all of a sudden this character leaps out. And I've had a similar experience where I write to the person, right? You know, and it makes it so much better for me. You know.
I kind of see it like another metaphor would be kind of like, hey, let's plan a road trip to Vancouver.
Oh yeah.
It's like that's where we're going to end up. All we know what it's going to be like. We're going to drive there. However, along the way, we could stop off and do whatever we want. Check out any cool things we want. That seems like a funner trip than we're going to plan this out of exactly where we're going to stay. We're going to stop in Edson for a 1 hour break. If you plan, then
Yeah.
it's like, well, it doesn't leave enough room. It's probably not going to be as good. Whereas if you kind of have the entire the long the long goal, you have the the beginning of the movie, the end of the movie, but then you have room to explore as you go. That leads to a way better story because there's a lot of if you read all the screenwriting books and you can get some good information from them if you're like a newer writer. but I hate it when they just have everything planned out where, on page 3 you have to have this happen, page 15 you have to have this
Oh
happen,
yeah.
and
Oh, I've
and
seen that
and
stuff too.
and
Yeah.
it's just and it's like, good Lord. And some of them are even saying like your main character has to have like a childhood incident that happened to them between the ages of 8 and 12 that somehow led to them, whatever their theme on the story or whatever it is. And I hate all that. Like, it just sounds like English class, right? Like, I don't think any writer gets into the business being like, you know what, I'm going to follow every one of these rules to a T.
Yeah, it
It's
actually
like,
sounds like
who wants to be a writer
superstition.
living in that kind of world? Like,
Yeah, it sounds like religious adherence to superstition, right? Where it's like, if I rub the rabbit's foot at exactly the right way, at
It's a
this,
hint.
this is gonna make it all happen.
Well, it's kind of like these rules that have been codified to be like, this is what good art is this thing. But like at the end of the day, what is good art? Because yeah, I've watched so many movies where like I'm pretty sure nobody sat down and like pre-conceptualized the whole thing. But like the movie is sometimes it stands out more to me. I mean, then again, some of those movies that are insanely well planned do come off very well. So like I think it's just a juggling game between the two. Personally, I think I'm similar to what you guys do, where like from scene to scene, I have a beginning point, I have a goal, I have my characters, and hopefully my characters are defined enough where like I'm just like, all right, characters, get me to the end goal, and like let
yeah.
them talk it out.
I think that, yeah, and your characters, the more real they become, the less they necessarily want to cooperate with you. But a novel is like life. A story is like life. Sometimes we don't have the perspective of the time when we're going through it, but when we are able to, like you asked me, how did you get into filmmaking, or how did you become the artist that you are now? I gave a hopefully somewhat condensed Cliff Notes version that was a narrative. It started here. I gave some imagery, this and that, and that only comes with the kind of foresight. And at the time, it wouldn't, or hindsight rather, at the time it didn't necessarily feel that way. I couldn't see the forest through the trees all the time. And if you read a good book or get a good story, sometimes you look back at it and think to yourself, it had to happen this way. There was structure, there was plan. Like, it was as if a plan. It had to happen this way. But when you're experiencing it, it feels spontaneous, and it feels as if these characters are generating their own decisions, and they really are. I think, in a way, if you've done it right. So it's a mystery. I think it's something we can't fully understand. And as artists, we just keep groping in the direction of it, trying to get that. But it's
I think
mysterious to me.
I think I once heard David Lynch say like coming up with a film or coming up with a script is kind of like you're in one room and there's a guy in the other room and he's cutting up little scenes and throwing them to you, but they're out of order. They're just like he's just throwing them over the wall and they'll show up. Like that happens so many times where I'll have a scene and it's just like, okay, this is a really cool scene, but now I have to figure out what goes like in front of it, after it, where does it go in the movie, and then
Mhm.
like eventually it takes enough shape where I can like write out a whole thing.
That's cool.
How how have you been
And
finding?
I find like a lot of times, like a lot of my movies start with just like one or two scenes. Like, I have this idea for this one scene, and I
Mm.
remember actually in my short film, "Okay, Thanks, Bye," there's a scene where actually Faizel, you were in that. It might have been
I was
like,
in that.
yeah,
Nice.
where the main character takes like a self-defense course, and then the big burly teacher starts like arguing with her, and then she just keeps slapping him. That was like the very first scene I came up with. And it got to the point after we wrote it, it's almost like the scene narratively did not make sense. And actually some of the people working on it were like, we should cut that scene because it doesn't fit in with the story. Like, the story works without it. And I was like, no, that's the whole reason I started. The whole thing started with that one scene. So even if that's true, it does add to her character. It's still a scene that gets a laugh. So we can kind of keep that in there. But I find a lot of, especially with the slasher movies I write, I'll write the kills first. Like, how about we do this kill, this kill, this kill, this kill, and then it's like, okay, how do we string them all together?
Hmm.
Now it's
So
like a
I'll start
puzzle.
putting in the pieces, filling in the little bits in between to make it make sense. But I find a lot of that, it's like that's kind of where your creativity comes from. Like, if you come up with a great idea for a scene, but you're like, you know what, I'm going to push that out of my mind because it doesn't fit in to my strict narrative structure, you're going to kind of lose out. Where if you could think of an amazing scene and it's like, that should be in the movie, because even if it doesn't, even if a screenwriting teacher would give you shit for it, it's like, I think that kind of should be in there, because a lot of no one's ever watched a movie and there's been a really, really funny part that they love. And they're like, but however, that structurally should not be in there, so I don't like the movie. No one's ever thought that, right? It's just like that's a funny scene. So I think I like a bit of like looseness in the stories rather than like just constant building of story. Like there's got to be a bit of room in there for the story to go off in another direction and then come back, and some things, little things that happen that may not get tied up, but they just add interesting, like the Coen brothers do that a lot, where
Yeah.
it's like it's still a well-made story, but there's some things that happen that don't really lead anywhere. It's just here's a funny instance and then back to the story. And those are kind of the scenes that are memorable.
It's Tarantinoing is what I used to
Yeah.
call it. I don't know if that, but like that's what he does too. He'll have like these, like I remember the first time I was aware of it, I think was Grindhouse, no, Death Proof. It was Death Proof, and they had this whole 15-minute conversation about Oingo Boingo and like talking about the history of Oingo Boingo, and I was just like, what are we doing here? And then 5 minutes later, I was like, oh, I see what he's doing. And then like I've just always noticed it since then. It's a weird, fun way where you can like I feel like Quentin Tarantino probably knows a lot about Oingo Boingo, and I feel like it's those weird things that like you can put something extremely nerdy and personal about yourself into a film, and it's not necessarily a flaw, even though sometimes it might look like a flaw. The flaw is what personalizes it and then makes it stick to you.
Yeah, and I think that to build off what you guys are saying, I think there's maybe some different elements in genre or different ways that these rules are applied. Like I think comedy, for instance, is a perfect example of, yes, let's make sure there's lots of room to play. Let's because though we want to be invested in the story, we want to care about the characters, because that creates some bond and that even allows the humor to flourish. You're not there, unnecessarily on the same kind of hero's quest that you might be for other films or other stories. So you want to explore, you want to smell the roses, you want to see how these two people interact, and you want to see their banter, and
you want to leave room for jokes.
Yeah, and I think that there is certainly something to be said about that philosophy for other genres, and it seems like it's a kind of a like that's an inherent part of, like, for yourself, Brandon, as your approach as a filmmaker. And I think that the charm that people get from your films and ways that they connect with it is because of that. It's not everyone does it that way necessarily. Some people are like really litigious and cut things, and maybe some people are into that. But you have this flow that is you, and it's expressive of yourself, and people connect with that. And I like that.
Well, thank you.
How have you been finding the reception for Dance with the Devil? Is this your first film that you've put out?
Well, it's the biggest thing I've done, I'd say. So it's a short film. It's a short film, though it's like almost 40 minutes long. So it's not a short film. And the reception's been incredible, actually. I feel like after the premiere, which was maybe 3 weeks ago, after the premiere, that evening, I felt like a filmmaker in a way for the first time ever. And I can't exactly I can't explain why.
It's very cool to like, because when every filmmaker starts with nothing, like you start with maybe an idea, maybe a thought in your head, and then you eventually build it to this thing that's so tangible and it's up on a big screen and so many people are involved, but like it came from you manifesting from nothing into like, again, something tangible that's on like a 50-foot screen. So like it's a magical, it's transformation process. I agree with you. It's magical.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I've done some kind of short film-esque type things. I can give a bit of context. I did, my music videos, they're very typically like performance-based. And then at a certain point I was like, I want to tell more stories. So I had some music videos which didn't involve any performance element. A good example of this is a song of mine called Her Smile, which the song actually tells a narrative and the video picks up on that narrative and demonstrates it through acting. And I started to play with that and do more of that. I had a song called Loser where I did the same thing. I kind of like mimicked John Wick and picked up on a metaphor from that film. And I was getting more and more short filmy in a way, expanding outside the music video genre a little bit. And then I did a short film because I wanted to do more dialogue. Now, I've done some acting. I did a bit of theater and stuff like that when I was younger. But this was the first time recording dialogue, sound, and working with an actor and just having fun. And that was called Very Common. It was about 10 minutes long. And I sent it to a few film festivals. I wanted to see what that was like. It got a little bit of recognition, which was cool. And then I was like, all right, let's do something else. And I did a project called 7 Songs for Life. Actually, I'm wearing the shirt today, which is great. And that was a 7-song EP that was put to a short film. Basically, it was a 28-minute story, but only told visually because there was no sound. I didn't have to have a sound recordist. There was just music backing it. And that I did a film premiere in my small town here of Edson, and it went really well. And that kind of was like, okay, I want to do more film stuff. I have wanted to do like real movies. So Dance with the Devil was going to be a bit smaller at first. It was going to be like a music video with dialogue and an intro and a bit of action, like a real film, but just real short. And then it expanded and got bigger and turned into nearly like a 40-minute episode of TV or something. And we did all the things. I composed the score. We have action. There's dialogue. There's a bit of humor. There's fun transitions. I wanted basically to make a proper film, just a short film, and I felt like it was a good proving ground, and people seem to be responding really well to it. And I mean, I learned a lot on it, but I'm very proud of it and very proud of the team and everyone's contributions to it.
I attended the premiere here in Edmonton, and I was very surprised. Not only at just the quality of the film, but just in your ability to put on a good show, right? Because so many people, I've been to other screenings where someone put all this effort into a movie, they don't really promote it, and you go to the theater and there's like 12 people there, and it's just not like a fun event. It's kind of like, oh, that was cool, but it's kind of, you put all this, you got to be a bit of a showman. You got to like just have pictures taken and have, posters for sale and just kind of get everyone excited. And I was very impressed of just how like happy and excited everyone was in the crowd, right? It was like definitely it was like a night to remember. And
oh man, thanks.
And especially for like a first time filmmaker, it's like it could have gone either way. It could have gone, everyone's like, yeah, we'll come out to help you out, but no one's really invested in it and stuff. It could have gone that way, but you could tell right away. It's like, wow, everyone's just like thrilled to be there, and you get to like talk to other filmmakers and other people, and Spencer did a good job at like hosting it. So I definitely recommend. I'm going. Bunch of us from Edmonton are going to Edson. When's the screening?
Oh yeah, Faizel. All right, right on. It's April 26th. So this episode may come out before then. Hey, so.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure it comes out before then. Yeah, everyone should come out. It's worth a trip to Edson just to see it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that, by the way. That was really great praise, and I appreciate it. And I think maybe some of why it was the way it is in part because, I am a performer and I've done rap music, right? I've performed on stage, and I've kind of tangled a little bit with that. Like, man, if people are paying to be here, I want them to have a good time. I don't want them to go home being like, ugh. Good for Spencer, it looks cool, but I helped him out. No, I want them to be like, I had an entertaining evening. I had a good time. And I think a lot of those details, plus like some of the extra things, we did like a skit and, the intro thing and, some.
Well, I was going to ask about the skit. I think I mentioned in the last episode with Julie, like this was the first time, like, I felt like we had an Edmonton event, like, where like everybody was coming from the film scene to like see these two movies, and like I love the little commercial you guys did essentially for both movies. Did you know Jarvis before that? Did you reach out to him just because you guys were on the same bill? What led up to this?
So with Jarvis, so I met Jarvis through Brandon actually, because when working on this film, I made a decision to myself, and I've been thinking for a long time, even though I'm 2 hours away from Edmonton, like, I love Edmonton. I have a lot of friends in Edmonton, and there's more artists there. It's a bigger population, and I want to get more connected to that scene. So I kind of reached out to Brandon, who I had met at the Hot Box premiere. I worked with his mom. It was like, I do art, he does art. That sounds cool. We had a coffee or something, and I kind of fell off the face of the map. I went to go film some behind the scenes, and on set for those 2 days, there was a couple people who were like, "Oh man, you got to meet Jarvis. Like you'd like Jarvis. You'd get along with him. He'd think you're cool." And I'm like, "All right, okay, that's cool. He sounds nice. I don't want to like force a meeting or something like
No,
that."
of course.
And then it was at the Grotesque 2 after party that I was invited to as well. And Jarvis was there. And even there's a couple people like, "Oh, I'm going to bring you over to meet Jarvis. Come, let's go check Jarvis out. Like you guys are going to get along." I could just see that. And I was like, "Stop. No, I'm good. Like I will get there and I'll talk to him when the time is appropriate. I don't want to be like, 'Hello, yes, people want us to meet.' Like that's just silly to me." So I was very much like, I'd just rather it be organic. And so I actually basically avoided him for most of the night. I talked to Elizabeth and Elena and Brandon, and I hung out with people that I knew and made some other new friends. But then it was like karaoke. It was like the after party. And he was sitting by himself in the booth for a second. And I looked over at him and he kind of looked at me and I was like, "All right." And so I came over and I sat next to him and we started talking. And yeah, we just talked about art and process. We hit it off. That was probably the only conversation that we had. And then I think we maybe messaged a couple times on Facebook. And then, yeah, I saw the posting of this Fava thing, which I didn't even know what Fava was at the time. And there's this big deal, actually, a big film festival. And they announced his thing after I had already announced my thing and tickets had already started to sell. So I didn't feel good about that. And so I reached out to him. Well, actually, no, there was cast and crew in both projects, for instance. Like, Elizabeth had participated in my project musically, and she was also in Markings of Murder, his film, musically and as an actor and stuff like that. And so she felt like, well, she wants to go to both. And other people had worked on both films. Jamie Clark did a bunch of makeup, and she helped me for a couple scenes. And so I basically reached out to him, and I was like, "Well, this sucks." And he's like, "Yeah, this does suck." And I think Elizabeth suggested maybe moving mine back an hour. And at first I was like, "No, I'm not doing that." People are already buying tickets and I can't do that. Like I don't want to, that's getting pretty late. 9:30 is pretty late. But I thought about it and thought seriously. And then I decided that, that could be a good idea. And it would be nice to cross promote our events or something. So then I think I asked Jarvis if he had time for a call. And I said, "Hey man, I have an idea. I don't know if you'll be into it, but I can move my event back an hour because I think people can meet both." And he was like, "Yeah, that'd be great." But for the record, he was like, "Oh, I'm telling people they can just go to your film." Like he was so generous. He was very much like,
that's Jarvis.
Yeah, he's like, "I have no ego in this." He's like, "Just, you got a new thing. Some of the cast and crew already seen my thing. I just, I want people to go to yours." And I'm like, "Man, that's so sweet, but let's support each other here." So I proposed the idea of doing just a funny video. I was like, "Would you be down if I wrote a little promo piece and came to Edmonton and we filmed it and we kind of, tried to make it a bit of a film evening and stuff?" And he was like, I didn't know him that well, but he was just totally game. And then
Jarvis is one of the most generous, with himself and with his time. He's one of the in this industry where I've met a lot of flaky people. Jarvis is one of those people that always comes through, regardless of whatever it is. I can never see nice enough things about Jarvis.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he
nice.
was one of the first. He was kind of the first big producer person I met when I started doing this. Was it 2016 or something? And that was my first script I ever sold, John 3:16, that he directed and produced. And from that time, he's never left. He's just consistently making things. He's directed things himself. He's produced other people's projects. He's always been involved, and he's great at just hooking people up with each other and kind of getting stuff made. He's helped get us gear before. He's definitely one of the best people to know if you want to get involved in this industry in Edmonton.
It's probably why when I was at your set, people were like, "Oh, you got to meet this guy," And like I said, I'm just usually rebellious and stuff. So I'm like, "Well, I'll see it happen. I don't need to, But no, he was awesome, and I've had several conversations with him, and it was very generous to him, and I think that he and I have developed some mutual respect. I've been able to check out some of his work actually and invest time into it. I saw John 3:16. We've talked about that, and saw Markings of Murder, and I think that he's doing some really great stuff, And so, yeah, it was nice. That's kind of how that came, and then I did a promo with Elizabeth after that, which was a little bit more involved of a work. It was a little bit more of a scripted thing. And that was kind of based off that idea. Like, that was fun to do at Jarvis. If Elizabeth's in town, let's make this happen too. And she was also game.
That's brilliant. Honestly, like I said, that's the one of the big like where it feels like, and I think I mentioned this when we were talking with Julie, but like I feel like the Edmonton scene is becoming more of a scene. Like there's a lot of cohesion happening, and I feel like your event, along with Jarvis's event, like it's one of those like, oh, I've not seen the Spider-Man movie, but what do they call it? A
Origin?
landmark? No, yeah,
Huh.
like when the sound happens and stuff. I've seen the memes. It's a
Oh,
flashback event or something like that.
I might
Canon.
say
It's a
again.
canon event.
Oh, a can. Oh, okay, gotcha. Like could be
Yeah.
can. I heard you guys actually talking a bit about this, about you were on your first episode about the punk rock scene in Seattle or something like that. It's like, did they know they were in the scene at the
Yeah,
time?
exactly.
And yeah, I thought that was interesting and insightful. And I think we often have a tendency to look outside of ourselves, look at other places, and go, "That's a scene. That's happening. Look at what
But
they're
never like
doing."
what's happening
Yeah.
here.
But it is legit. I think that, though I'm quite new to the picture, there's filmmakers and people working in the Edmonton scene, independent and otherwise. And I do think it is possible that there's some coalescing happening, that people are really getting to know each other, and that we can hopefully kind of raise more opportunities for each other and make some really exceptional work out of this area.
I think we
Absolutely.
can.
And I just love like every time we have someone like you that's kind of newer to the scene, and all of a sudden you start meeting people, and then it's like, hey, well, Elizabeth works in my movies, but then she goes on to work in your movie too. So it kind of gives more opportunities. Because if
Right.
there was only like one filmmaker in the city, there's just not enough going on to make it worthwhile. Once
Hmm.
more people start doing it,
Well,
actors and crew have more things to do. So more people, it just draws more people into it because they see it happening, and it just like it kind of, the whole, rising water lifts all ships or whatever the saying is.
Yeah.
So the more going on, it's going to benefit everyone.
well, and I'm very fascinated by how different the storytellers that come up here are. Like Brandon, your film is completely different from anything I've ever seen. Even though you've written some of the stuff for Jarvis, like he has his own style and touch to it that is completely separate from what you do. What you do is completely separate from what Spencer does. Like it's all such a wide breadth of influences and stylistic origin. It's and all inside of this very small town. It's crazy to me. It's very inspiring some days.
Yeah. And I think it is nice to have variety, I mean, it's a natural consequence. If you have real artists, they are real people, and real people, though we are more alike than we're different, I think we have fundamental kind of unique perspectives and worldviews. And it's going to be a natural consequence that if people are being authentic, you're going to have different voices and feelings and flavors come to this scene. It's only if everyone's trying to be like, if I was on like, man, I need to make my own grotesque, I need to be just like Brandon. Yeah, that'll like that cheapens it somehow. It's
Of
just
course.
like it's not the right thing. But since I think we are trying to have our own voices and flavors and do the things that we like, yeah, that's a good scene. That's what we should be encouraging is authenticity, and we shouldn't be trying to mimic. It's like, oh, this film did good, or this film was super cool. Let's do that again, or let's do no, do the thing that you're actually passionate about.
On that note, do you have any key influences you cite, or do you have anything that you do go back to like I'm very happy with admitting there's several movies that I will spend my entire life trying to mimic just because of like how influential they were to me. I'm just always going to try and repeat what they've tried to do. Do you have anything like that where you'd call like this is my key influence that informs like most of my work going
Right.
forward?
I have films that I absolutely love. If I thought hard enough about it, I'd probably have like a top 10. Musically, I think I could strafe a bit and say like musical influence and how it relates to film influence for me.
Please.
I'm not, for instance, I'm not like I love the movie Signs, for instance.
Oh yeah.
Signs is I think a very masterful film. I think it's really well told suspense. It's interesting. It's philosophical in nature. The performances are great. It's fun. It's spooky. It has all these great qualities, and the cinematography. Like I love that film. but I don't have a desire to make Signs, to make that film. But I do have a desire to make, spoiler alert, the moment, in Signs where it's like Meryl swing away, where he goes and grabs, and Mel Gibson's character realizes, oh shit, that's what the words of his wife meant. And so he says that, and then we see Meryl swing away and we see the bat, and it all clicks, and it's like, this is the moment, this is where it's going down. This is like the power of narrative. Everything rests on this moment. That intensity, that moment, that feeling, that I want to replicate.
I get it. Yeah.
But I don't look at necessarily the ingredients of the dish that they put into that. They made a great, they made a great dish, but it's like, I'm also going to make a great dish that's going to make you're going to believe in God after eating food like this, the same way that I did with that. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be some holy, sacred moment is going to strike you, and you're going to go, wow, this is real art. That's what I'm striving for. And I feel that way musically, though I do rap music and, melodic stuff. I actually listen to a lot of stuff that isn't rap. I am totally not on like a lot of the rap train. Like, I don't understand a lot of these new artists and what they're trying to do. A lot of it, I'm kind of just influenced by various places. But I would say, yeah, the feeling of which, the way that it can trigger my imagination, my longing, that is what I'm trying to replicate. And I guess that, of course, I do have influences, and genre-wise, I'm going to find, as, I'm doing a spy thriller thing where I would dance with the devil, and there's a bit of James Bond in there. There's a bit of Bourne. Like, there's for sure influences and things that I've seen that I'm trying to, whether consciously or not, get a kind of static charge by being next to. So I understand that too, but I would say that's how I think of it.
Well, I think we should wrap it up there. Thanks for being on the show, Spencer. And yeah, everyone definitely go check out on the April 26th. Check out Spencer's movie in Edson. Definitely
going to Edson.
Trip.
Nice.
And thanks for being on the show. I guess we'll talk to you guys later.
Yes, thank you again. You guys did great.
All right, have a good one, you guys. Brandon, I will see you for our post-interview wrap-up.
Absolutely. Okay, Faizel, so now is our review time. So tell us what we're going to be talking about this time.
Well, I mean, so I'm excited about the Penguin TV series coming out. So I thought we could talk about the last Batman with Robert Pattinson. I really enjoyed it. I know you don't watch, like you said, you don't watch the superhero off-spin things. I have to be honest, I don't watch superhero movies in general. The last one I watched was Batman, but I haven't seen one before that since like Black Panther. I'm not aware of anything that's going on in the Gotham or like DC or Marvel world. But I did like that movie.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I think there's a lot of people that just got sick of the superhero movies. Like, I was, even like 10 years ago, I was so into them, like, basically from childhood up until like 2017 or so. It was great, and then I kind of got bored of it, and they're not so good anymore. But it's kind of funny because I don't really consider Batman a superhero movie, even though it totally is. But he's always kind of, in my mind, been separate. Maybe because it's been, from the 60s and the 80s, and then they've always made Batman films, even when superhero films weren't so ubiquitous. Batman's always been kind of something they made.
Yeah, there's kind of been a Batman for almost every era since like the 60s.
Yeah. I think there's even in the 40s they had like the TV show and stuff. So it's.
I did not know that. There was a 40s Batman TV show?
I think like black and white. I could be wrong, but I think I remember seeing something about that.
I can believe it. I'll look it up because the Addams Family went back about that far. So like.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Because I remember the Batman costume just kind of looked really crummy and stuff. But I did like the whatever that last one that came out, the Robert Pattinson one. I don't even consider myself a movie reviewer. Like, other than when I'm with a friend, like I never publicly speak on my views of movies. So it's kind of weird that we're doing this. It's kind of outside the box for me. But like, if I'm being honest, like I thought the movie was too long. They could have cut about a third of it out. And it just seems like they're always tempted. Like, I think me and maybe a lot of people are interested in seeing Batman and the things around Batman. But they somehow have this thing in their mind where that's not enough. We need to add all these other plot lines, like, oh, there's corruption in the mayor's office and corruption in the police, and there's a gangster in town, all his stuff too. That's on top of the villains that Batman's dealing with, and then we have to add Catwoman and her backstory to it, and it just seems like they could either condense that down a lot or kind of get rid of some of those, because it just seems it's like a lot of excess story where I would rather replace all that stuff with just more cool Batman scenes.
Fair enough. I kind of actually I come at it from the opposite direction, because like I really liked the backstories they had for everybody, and I liked how they kind of like, not directly, but they did tie things into, like, I guess you'd call it social commentary, but I don't like that word for film, because like that puts it in a certain time in a certain place. I feel like it like what's being talked about in Batman is timeless, but like they contextualize it for like 2024 or 2023, which I really liked. And you know what? Here, actually, I'll ask you a question in regards to, like, so I grew up in Tanzania, so I had no conception of pop culture at all, right? I like, especially in terms of music, no idea what was going on. I had the internet, so I was like downloading my own shit, but like I used to think the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones were like a super underground band. That's like how out of touch I was with it. So like, I know for me it was pretty striking that they used like Nirvana's "Something in the Way" as the opening song, and I don't know how popular that song is here. Like, it's the last. It's the last song on that album, and I didn't know how popular it was. So like when it showed up in there, I was like, interesting.
Yeah, and honestly, that's the only song I can remember from the movie is that part, and that was a noticeable part, because I was like, holy crap, that's such a strange choice. Like,
It is, isn't it?
When I was a kid, like Nirvana was popular, but
Of
that
course.
song was not a mega popular Nirvana song. I'm sure like their fans liked it, but it wasn't a
It's a bit of a downer. Like it's
Yeah.
not as like up tempo as the other stuff, and like it's just Kurt and like his acoustic. Maybe there's some drums in there. Like
and it fits.
it
the
is a
movie, though.
strange
It fits
choice,
the movie
isn't it?
quite well. Like
It does.
It's kind of a depressing song, but it fits that. And I will say, like, the one thing, although I don't like all the offshoot stories, one good thing about it is that they did a great job of creating the world. Of just creating, like, it's not just a city and all you see is Batman. There's like other stuff in this world, so you kind of get a better picture view. So in that way, it's like they succeeded in that. I just prefer kind of smaller, tighter stories. Even in my own stuff, I'm kind of getting away. I'm kind of sick of the whole universe world building thing. And I read an article.
You're trying
it was
to,
in a
like,
horror magazine. They had an article about how movies, like in decades past, they used to be, the world was the movie. The story started and ended in the movie. No sequel, no world building. That was it. And there's kind of like a charm or something to that, where it's like, this is the movie. Whereas now it's like every story you go in expecting, like, every character is going to have their own thing, and then it's almost getting
Like it's
too
kind of
much.
crazy. Like they have like the Shining, not the Shining. What are the horror movies? Like Insidious and all those, and they're trying to build an entire world out on that. And like it's like not everything deserves a cinematic universe. You know who I think did it really well was the Kevin Smith and his Askew universe. Askew universe. You'd have like characters that would be in the movies that were from other movies, but they never really like really interacted with each other.
Yeah.
They were just kind of there, and they like you got the sense that they all lived in the same town, but there weren't like giant crossover events or anything like that.
And it makes it hard to kind of keep track of, and it leads to like plot holes where, because I always wondered, like, especially in Marvel comics, because I was always a big Punisher fan, and Punisher was he didn't really interact because he was more like street level crime. So you'd be reading this Punisher story about him fighting some drug dealers, but meanwhile the Fantastic Four are fighting an alien invasion of New York City. So it's like, wouldn't he notice buildings crumbling around him? Like, wouldn't
Like-
that be affecting it? But they kind of just gloss over that.
Exactly.
It's like sometimes I prefer, like, let's just have it a separate universe, so not everything affects everything else.
Can I ask you? I know this started as a Batman like review, but I do like where this conversation is going, and I have questions because, like, okay, so you like the Punisher, so I have to ask you, what is your favorite cinematic representation of the Punisher?
Dolph Lundgren, hands down.
Really, you like the '80s
cheesy
Dolph
as that
Lundgren
movie
one?
is, it's so awesome. Although the Punisher Warzone one is almost there. Like I like that movie. The Thomas Jane one, I have.
You're not a fan of it? Oh man, that's my favorite one.
I
But
like how we're
I
opposite on
like
everything.
Thomas
Makes
Jane
the
as an
conversation
actor.
interesting. There were good things I did like about it, like the Russian. Like they did have some good parts about the Thomas Jane one.
Yeah, when you fought Kevin Nash and they were
Yeah.
like smacking each
There
other
was,
through
there's
that whole
actually
thing.
there's
That
a
was
lot
pretty
of
fun.
like if you just took that movie and edited all the cool parts together, it's kind of cool. It's just the things like they changed his backstory. They changed it from New York to Tampa, Florida for some reason.
Yeah.
And they had him
Yeah,
fighting
for,
with
like,
his
no
dad,
real
and
reason.
it's like him and his dad are fighting side by like. There's so many things that I'm just. It just veered so far off the Punisher's story that I just couldn't.
They did have microchip. They did. Was it the Thomas Jane one the first time the microchip showed up?
No, Warzone was microchip.
Oh, was it Warzone that was microchip?
Yeah, the Wayne
Okay.
Knight. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, but even I don't think they've ever quite got the Punisher right. I even tried watching the TV series, and I got like 4 episodes in, and it's just something that like I've read like every Punisher thing ever made almost up until a certain point, and they've just never been able to quite replicate it. It's like every other
I think
superhero.
because
they can do.
on film, I don't think anybody is ever going to go far enough. I think the comics went pretty far in terms of like the action that they did and the storylines and stuff. I don't think TV. Did you ever see the fan film Laundry Day
No.
with Thomas Jane?
No.
I think they were trying to like get a sequel made for the Thomas Jane one, so they made like a short fan film called Laundry Day. It's pretty good actually. If you ever get a chance to watch it, check it out.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like on YouTube. It's like 10 minutes. But back to Batman. How did you feel about Colin Farrell's job as the Penguin?
I thought it was great. It was a very interesting interpretation of the Penguin. There's been, I mean, if you go from like the '60s Penguin to like the Danny DeVito, like they're like night and day. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of room to move, and they couldn't just repeat the same thing they already did. So one, you couldn't even tell it was Colin Farrell. Like it didn't even.
So
look
I
like
wanted to ask you, did you realize it was Colin Farrell through the movie? I didn't realize until the very end. I was like, who played the Penguin? Holy shit, it was Colin Farrell?
Yeah, I only knew because I read that it was him. Like if I just looked at him, I would not have recognized him. But yeah,
Oh
it was
my
such a
God.
good interpretation. He did a good job. Especially like I don't even think he's a great actor. I don't like to bash people, but I've never been a fan of
No.
his. But I'm like, holy cow, he did a good job of that.
It's very strange because I'm watching him in a different show right now called Sugar, and it's all right, it's good, it's fine, but like the character is from Chagrin Falls, Ohio, but like Colin Farrell is doing it in an Irish accent, which makes no sense to me. But and like I know he can do an accent, he did the Penguin accent perfectly, so
Yeah,
I
I am interested to see the next Batman film when it comes out.
oh yeah.
It's like honestly, of all superhero movies that are starting to not appeal to me, like it seems like it's the one that's the kind of the shining beacon that might actually continue to be a good series.
Why do you think Batman has been so universal in terms of its like appeal?
I don't know. I think it's just like it's an old, just kind of. I think people like those vigilante stories, right? Just people fighting crime, and it's simple, and you don't need a massive universe around it and a really complicated backstory, and you don't need infinity stones and other things like that. It's just he's mad because his parents were killed, so he fights crime. That's the story, and he's just
You know
dark.
what? That's
he looks
good.
cool. The villains are cool. The dark, gritty city's cool. So you kind of put that all together. It just makes a story that's going to have appeal to it.
That's a pretty good explanation. I've always said DC has the coolest villains. Hands down,
Yeah.
the DC villains are the cooler ones.
Yeah, I love DC villains.
I was going to ask you what you thought of the movie overall. Do you want to give it a rating out of 10?
Oh, sure. I guess overall, I would give the new Batman movie. I give it 7.5 out of 10.
7.5?
How about you?
All right, because I know you don't like to give out a 10. I'm very curious to find out. Maybe one of these days, do you have a 10 that you've ever come across, or have you yet to come across a 10?
I'd have a few 10, maybe. It's kind of one of those things. I want to leave some wiggle room in case, like, what if I
Yeah.
give a movie a 10 and then I see a better movie then it's like, what do I give that, right? So I always say, like, even Godfather would be like 9.7. You know, it's getting there.
Okay. I'd love to hear a list of your perfect tens. Maybe we'll have to do that as a side
Yeah,
podcast one day.
absolutely.
What are the perfect tens? I think I'd give it a 7. Yeah, a strong 7, light 8. It could have done more. It could have done less. So yeah. Anyways, that was a great podcast. I love our conversation. I always love talking movies with you, like Brandon. If you didn't realize, I love talking like what people think about movies and what people think like movies mean. So like this is fun for me, and I love trying to bring you out of your shell on it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. All right.
All right, well, folks,
See you guys next time.
Keep in touch for the next podcast.